Hi, welcome to rtcrescue.com. Sorry it's been a while since I've put any videos on the site, so I just thought, do you know what, I'll do something a little different and put this little recording together on a subject that I've been thinking about for quite some time. So I thought, hey, why not, let's put something together and put it out there and see if it encourages some discussion, debate and thought on the subject. Vehicle stability. Basically looking at, do we need to rethink it, do we need to update it for certain situations only, and what is our current methodology on vehicle stability. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously please do comment after the video on the channel, see what you think. So why we're here then. So recently there's been a lot of evidence-based research. Things are changing all the time in regards to the clinical aspects and extrication, casualty-centred approach, and the outcomes, long-term outcomes for the casualties and patients that we deal with in vehicle-related incidents. Stability has always been an issue. I've been an instructor, I've been in the service for a long time, and we always see issues with the basics of stabilisation. So it really just got me rethinking about the whole concept. And is it time to change, or do we just stay doing what we're doing? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but perhaps between us all, a lot of people with the same interests as myself out there, to give it some thought and come up with perhaps some ideas of how we could best look at how our approach is, even for just these basic applications. So historically, many years extrication's been around. It's been developed over the years by a lot of experts. A lot of materials have been written and books, etc. And a lot of very experienced, knowledgeable people today developing and driving change and trying to encourage change. But for me, I've been in service for quite a long time. And I think, change is great. There's people that don't like things the way they are, but they don't like change either. So trying to implement change is sometimes a bit of a job in itself. Extrication wise, vehicle stabilisation, when we went to basic training, we were taught how to stabilise a car, and that's pretty much what we've done since. Not always the same processes, not always bad. Equipment's developed over time with the recent books and bits and pieces and information that's now being put out there. It's giving people a slightly different outlook and concept on how we stabilise vehicles. But I think for most, monkey see, monkey do. A long time ago we were showing this is how you stabilise a car on its wheels, and this is kind of what we default to for most situations. Rightly or wrongly, who knows? Change is difficult to implement, but is it change for change's sake? Do we need to change what's working? Again, I don't know. It's just something I thought would open up this discussion, have a look at some different ideas, and see what you think. So blocks and wedges, always been the standard, step blocks. We stabilise a vehicle in some form or another. Hasn't changed much over the years, maybe some of the equipment has, and slight different thought processes, more so around how we stabilise alternatively powered vehicles. For this chat really, what we're going to do, we're just going to be chatting about predominantly a vehicle on its wheels only. We're not going to be discussing any other types of stabilisation, so don't get yourselves overexcited. We're not going to be talking about getting rid of anything specific. We're just going to focus this on a vehicle on its wheels, which is kind of our standard bread and butter extrication incidents. So standard stability on a vehicle, something like this, using the same or similar equipment to try and create some sort of steady platform, preventing forward and backward movement, and then your standard block configuration. Obviously, when we're looking at vehicles in more precarious positions, yes, we're going to need to stabilise them. Yes, we're going to need to create a safe system of work and a safe working environment. That goes without saying. So, could we default then to, do we just stabilise the vehicle to prevent forward and backward movement only? Is there a need for any of the other stabilisation? Depending on the casualty situation, the type of incident, clinical guidance that we get on scene, that will help aid the extrication planning and what stabilisation we do or don't put in place. Do we just stabilise the one side of the car that we're mainly working if there's only one casualty or patient on that side? Do we need to do all 4 areas of the vehicle, or sometimes 5 or 6? Is there a need to do all of that? Especially these days when we're talking about reducing on-scene times, speeding up the rescue. I know there's some people out there that already think that, do we need to stabilise the car? Does it do anything? Good question. I think it does. So I don't have the answer. I'm kind of thinking about, do we or don't we stabilise the car on its wheels anymore to a point. But then I also have the thought of, actually, perhaps we should. So, some of the reasons why we're stabilising a car, we're trying to create a solid working platform and a stable working platform so that clinicians, rescuers and the likes can work in and around the vehicle safely. We want to prevent any further unwanted movement of the vehicle. Naturally, we don't want it rolling off down the road or sudden movement that could compromise the casualty situation. But importantly, I think what is often forgotten is it disperses the cutting forces down into the ground. So as we know that when we are cutting pillars, we get those impacts and those noises, and then a sudden shock as that metal is sheared. That goes down through the vehicle, can potentially be distributed through the vehicle and the casualty or casualties. So it has been shown that blocks and good stability actually transfers that energy down through the blocks and into the ground, reducing the amount of movement that goes through the vehicle. Also, stability offers structural support. So when we're cutting, depending on what evolutions we're doing, it stops certain components from moving because we're holding them in place with some form of cribbing or stability, etc. So there's quite a few methods why we stabilise a vehicle. So could we get rid of stability in some part or form or another? Could we reduce it? Do we need to do as much stabilisation as we currently do? A difficult question. This is why we need to give it some thought and see if there's any viability, and perhaps create some evidence to show that there is room and thought for removing some of it. We'll talk about force transfer down through the block. So again, do we add extra stabilisation? So when we're cutting the A, B and C pillars, where predominantly we'd only stabilise in the B pillar area at the base for a dash relocation, or in some cases people don't, where it's structurally sound, do we need to pack underneath the B pillar? So when we cut that heavy duty pillar, all that force is dispersed down into the ground. Is this now overkill? Are we now adding too much stabilisation, adding too much time, requiring more equipment? So again, I'm sort of talking about the logic and the reasons why we stabilise, but now that potentially some of that logic means we need to add stabilisation. There's another way of looking at it. Are we comfortable with how we have always done things, or are we just going to continue to do the same? We need to move with the science and the evidence. We've done stability for years, but now is the time to actually discuss it and rethink it. Do we need to actually move forward and keep up with this development? Change is good. Sometimes change isn't needed. But as with everything, like I said earlier, we've done vehicle stabilisation for many years the same way. It doesn't mean we need to keep doing it that way. To give you an example, I once suggested that for an RTC, we just in the United Kingdom, sort of one of the go-to things when we arrive at an incident is to pull off a hose wheel jet, which is like a big long garden hose, and that would be a standard deployment to safeguard against fire. I once raised this on a forum, and it stand from under. The comeback from that was massive. Kind of put me off using forums. You know what I mean? But that was one simple change. In my service, we have removed as a directive to use a hose wheel jet. We just use suitable firefighting media. So perhaps a couple of extinguishers might be just the job, instead of creating all these trip hazards and whatnot goes with a big hose being run out, which again, as time gets in the way, when if we ever really needed it. And yes, there will always be occasions where you might have had to have used it, and I know people get quite excited about this when you mention it. But it's just to give an example of, we're not comfortable with change, but actually sometimes we need to revisit things to make our work easier, make us more effective on scene, and actually just put things in place that work for what we're trying to achieve. Again, we look at a vehicle off-road. How many times, monkey see, monkey do. For years we go to an incident like this and we just stabilise the car. But actually, if you reflect on it, was that stabilisation effective? Was the blocks just sinking in the grass, sinking in the mud, sinking in the soft ground, regularly having to be revisited? Or it just gets to the point, well, they're there, but we're not really doing a lot because they keep coming loose, so we just lose that focus. So actually, do we need to stabilise this car anyway? If, again, we're talking about something that's relatively flat, not off the ground, not resting up against the tree, just sort of a car gone into a field or on just a verge, things like that. Do we need to stabilise it? Hopefully people are thinking, no, we don't already. We're just doing these. Sometimes these robotic tasks are good for discipline, and it becomes a structured approach to an incident. But actually, sometimes we need to be comfortable to say, do you know what? It's not going to be effective here. Let's not put it in place. I don't know. See what you think. So why this subject and why now? So this is sort of one of the things that's driven me to think about this. So those, you might be familiar with the Exit project, some fantastic work done by Dr. Tim Nutbeam and his team, and fire rescue services from Avon Fire Rescue, etc. Done a lot of extrication based studies, a lot of work with a lot of professional experts. I won't go into the nuts and bolts. The website's on there. It's worth a visit and reading some of the documents and evidence-based literature that's been written. And it's all around assisted self-extrication in a simplistic explanation. So where we're talking about better outcomes for the casualties and patient outcomes in the long term, reducing the long-term rescue times. So again, if we're happy to self-extricate or assisted self-extricate, and the damage, I'm not a doctor, don't quote me on this, but we're kind of thinking, this is my thought process. So I thought I'd raise this as quite a good discussion point. I'm sure people will redirect me if I'm getting this quite a little bit wrong. But I'm thinking if we can get people to assisted self-extricate, because it's all about the getting them from A to B, packaging them up and then doing the evasive life-saving care away from the vehicle and getting them onto the operating table or the trauma centres and as such. Then how much is stabilisation actually going to affect? Will it affect the casualties outcome, if at all? If we've got complex entrapments, then yes, we might need to stabilise because we don't want movement, or we just put in some minimal stabilisation, forward or backward movement, or just in certain specific areas for the reason of the situation and the extrication required. Do we need to go belt and braces and extricate the car, stabilise the car fully? Well, actually, all we're doing is adding to time, equipment use, and does it fit with all of this evidence-based superb work that's been going on? So this is what drove my thought process around this. So I thought, you know what, I've been thinking about it a long time. Let's put it out there into the public, and let's see what comes back from it. If we don't change anything, it's no problem. We're kind of led by our services and what we're required to deliver. But between us all, we can also promote and encourage change as well. Again, we're clinician led. So again, depending on what development, training, exposure clinicians have had to vehicle related incidents, that might also factor in what stabilisation and what bits and pieces are done following the information we gained from that dialogue on scene. Doesn't have a great, clinicians won't have a massive input on whether we stabilise the car, but obviously we need to create a safe environment. We need to make it safe and workable for clinicians to enter work in and around the vehicle. So this can have a little added addition to what we do and when we do it. So yeah, it's just something to think about there. So really, what's the answer? Give it some thought before you reply to these comments. Please keep them relevant and be respectful to others that take the time to comment, and please keep it in context. It's just something that I thought I'd share with you. So in a nutshell, really we're summarising, for a vehicle on its wheels only, and the evidence-based research that's been done by the Exit project and all that fantastic work and work done by others, do we actually need to keep fully stabilised a vehicle as we have done for the last 20, 30, 40 years? Or actually do we need to think smarter and think, do you know what, actually perhaps we don't need to stabilise the car as much? But again, taking into the factors we've discussed and the other reasons why we stabilise a vehicle, might be just a case of, do you know what, it does what it says on the tin, so let's stick with it. Alright, please do feedback, give us some thoughts. I'm sure this will whet a few appetites, but please don't get yourselves too excited. We're not saying remove stabilisation, it's just saying let's rethink it, let's have a look. Could there be some room for a change or some slight adjustments? Anyway, thanks for watching this, I would say short or relatively longish video of me chatting and a few pictures. Take care, I'll put something together for another day. Cheers, bye bye.